Hi, this is Kelly Coughing with Milliman. Today we're going to talk about retirement risks, and we're going to compare them side by side for traditional defined benefit plans, 401k type plans, defined contribution plans, and stabilized variable annuity pension plans. For the first time in many years, there's this new type of retirement plan design, and it deserves serious attention. It's called a stabilized variable annuity pension plan, or a VAPP for short. A VAPP has significant advantages over today's predominant plan designs, 401k type plans and traditional pension plans. If you have viewed our other side-by-side videos, you've heard me say that a VAPP provides lifelong inflation-protected benefits to participants, but employers get to make stable, predictable contributions like they would to a 401k plan. It's really the best of both worlds. And the reason it works, the magic if you will, is that the stabilized VAPP balances the risks between the sponsors and the participants in a rational way, while eliminating as many risks as possible. So in today's video, I'm going to briefly describe the major retirement risks, and then show how those risks stack up for the three plan designs. The 5 major retirement risks are investment risk, interest rate risk, longevity risk, inflation risk, and portability risk. There are others, but those are the main ones. We'll just take them in order. Investment risk. Nobody who's an adult today is a stranger to this risk. You just lived through 2 of the biggest market events in the last 100 years. The crisis in 2008, the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s, and most of us are students of the market crash of 1929, followed by the Great Depression. The second major risk is interest rate risk. This is the risk that the price of a bond-type instrument will change because of changes in interest rates. This has a pretty big impact on pension plans. For years and years, for accounting purposes, we've used yield curves to calculate the liabilities. And since PPA, for corporate plans, we've been using it to calculate liabilities for funding purposes as well as for accounting. So what happens is, as the yield curves change out in the marketplace, the liabilities of a pension plan shift dramatically. So when rates are low, liabilities are quite high, and vice versa. So what happens for a traditional pension plan is the investment risk is out there making the assets volatile, and now the interest rate risk is busy making the liabilities volatile, and it creates difficult and volatile funding requirements. Longevity risk is the risk associated with not knowing how long one is going to live. This risk is very difficult for a participant or for an individual to manage. A person has to decide, am I going to save my money so that it'll last until I'm 100? Or am I going to spend it to assume I live to life expectancy and have a 50% chance of outliving my assets? There is a very real chance that a person trying to manage their own money in retirement will outlive their assets. However, for a pension plan, longevity risk is quite easy to manage. As an actuary, I have a very difficult time telling you when one person is going to die. But if you give me 10,000 people, I can't tell you who's going to die, but I can give you a pretty good sense of how many deaths we'll experience each year. So for a pension plan, or a VAPP as it turns out, you pool that risk, and then it makes it much, much easier to manage, and we can actually fund a pension plan to the average life expectancy of the group. Instead of having to plan to live to be 100, it actually increases retirement income. Inflation risk is the risk associated with loss of purchasing power over time. As the price for goods and services go up, the fixed income loses its value. In fact, assuming 3% annual inflation, a fixed benefit would lose 60% of its value over 30 years. Portability risk is the risk associated with lower retirement income resulting from changing employers a couple times during your career. Lots of times people think of portability risk or of portability as being able to drag your money with you from one employer to another. But really the risk is that by moving from one employer to another, you're going to lose retirement income, or you won't be able to accumulate as much retirement income as you would have if you'd stayed with one employer. So let's look at how these risks stack up. Here's the risk allocation for a traditional defined benefit plan. The risks are predominantly borne by the sponsor. The sponsor here is represented in green. and the participants are represented by guys in orange hard hats. Most of the risks are borne by the sponsor, and in fact, the two most difficult risks for the sponsor to bear are borne by the sponsor: investment risk and interest rate risk. I mentioned before that investment risk causes volatile assets and interest rate risk causes volatile liabilities, and the combination of the two is very difficult for sponsors to manage. Longevity risk is also borne by the sponsor, but it's easy for the sponsor to manage longevity risk because of the pooling feature. So that leaves inflation risk and portability risk to be borne by the participants. Most corporate pension plans do not provide a CPI or a cost of living adjustment to the benefit, and so that leaves participants with a fixed income for their lifetime, and they have to find another way to manage that inflation. Participants in traditional defined benefit plans also bear portability risk because if they change jobs, typically their benefit gets stuck at their salary when they quit and doesn't keep pace with their salary growth over time. But predominantly in a traditional defined benefit plan, the risks are borne by the sponsor. It's the exact opposite in a defined contribution plan. In a defined contribution plan, all of the risks are borne by the participants. The sponsor makes their contribution to the plan, and that's it. They don't hold any risk after that. So that leaves the participants to bear investment risk, longevity risk, inflation risk, and interest rate risk, all of which are difficult for them to manage. Portability risk is significantly reduced because even if you change employers, the money in your old plan continues to grow. So if you worked at 3 different companies, you would likely still have the same retirement income when you retire as you would have had if you'd stayed with one employer. That assumes that the money doesn't leak out of the plan and turn into something other than retirement income. So you can see that the two predominant plan designs either put most of the risk on the sponsor or most of the risk on the participants. But the stabilized variable annuity pension plan balances those risks in a more rational way, and it balances them very carefully between the sponsor and the participants. So first, let's look at the risks that are minimized. Inflation, portability, and interest rate risk are all significantly reduced. Inflation and portability sort of go together. In a variable annuity plan, when the market returns are high, benefits go up. So this allows over time for inflation protection for participants. It doesn't match CPI. They don't get a full hedge of inflation, but we do expect benefits will go up over time, which will provide some inflation protection. For the same reason, the benefits are portable. That is, somebody can quit working in a variable annuity plan, move on to a new employer, and their benefit will still go up over time, and then it will be larger when they retire than it was when they terminated. So inflation and portability are significantly reduced, and the interest rate risk is essentially eliminated. In a variable annuity plan, we effectively value the liability at what's called the hurdle rate, which is actually part of the plan design, and it stays the same year over year over year. So interest rate risk is eliminated because when we look at a current yield curve, we say, oh, well, let's assume that we'll get those returns over time on our assets. And then we say, oh, well, if the yield curve stays 5% all years, we're going to assume some level of benefit increases over time. And when we discount those back, it's essentially mathematically the same as valuing the liability at that hurdle rate. Well, if instead the yield curve is at 6% instead of 5%, we'll project different benefit increases into the future, and when we discount those back, we land at the exact same liability number. So the liabilities in a variable annuity plan are not interest rate sensitive. So that is great because the liability then is very predictable over time. That leaves the two other risks, longevity risk and investment risk. As I talked about at the beginning, it makes a lot of sense to pool longevity risk. You can effectively reduce the risk by pooling it. So we do that here, and it allows the sponsor to fund benefits assuming people live to life expectancy, which results in much larger benefits than if people are busy trying to spread their money out to last till they're 100. So people enjoy a bigger value of benefits per dollar of contribution in a VAPP than they would in a DC plan. So we pool the longevity risk, put it with the sponsor, and that leaves the investment risk. And we put the investment risk with the participants for this main reason. We really want sponsors out there running their businesses and not worrying about what the return is in the pension plan or what the liabilities of the pension plan are going to be, or what kind of contribution are we going to have this year, and will it get in the way of our running our business. So it doesn't make sense for the sponsor to bear the investment risk. And with a stabilized VAPP, we've essentially, within the plan, build up a savings account so that if the markets go down, we provide benefit stabilization to participants. So the participants are really not affected much by the investment risk except on the upside. So the VAPP then balances the risk in the best possible way, provides stabilized lifelong income to participants that increases with time to provide some inflation protection, and at the same time sponsors get to make a nice predictable contribution to the plan. If you would like to hear more about variable annuity pension plans, you can view one of our side-by-side videos. There's benefit side-by-side and funding side-by-side. They can be seen on this site, or you can get some general information on VAPPs by going to milliman.com/insights-VAPPs. Thank you.